The World Championships for track and field are still about 6 months away. The only reason why I remember that so much is because the pro athletes themselves continue to keep reminding me. It is the reason why almost every Olympian that America sent over to Paris in 2024 is not going to be representing us at the World Indoor Championships, except for Grant Holloway, of course. Shout out to you. And if you actually want to know who the athletes are that America will send over to the World Indoor Meet, you're probably going to be doing a whole lot of Google research, because most of them are athletes who you've probably never seen before. To be clear, this is one of those moments where I originally had no intentions on making this video, and then after I got up this morning, I took a moment to listen to the Beyond the Records podcast, where Noah Lyles and Rai Benjamin interviewed their special guest, Vernon Norwood. I quickly realized that the footage itself may be a little bit dated, because although it dropped the day I'm recording this video, I'm pretty sure they filmed it back when New Balance Indoor was going off. All that being said, the part of the podcast that I found most interesting had to be when they started kicking it back and forth about their honest opinions on Grand Slam track. And I have to bring this up for a reason, because Rai Benjamin and Noah Lyles himself are not signed to Grand Slam track. And in Vernon Norwood's case, he is not signed to Grand Slam track either, even though he expresses that he wished they had given him a call, and he might show up as a challenger. But hey, that's another conversation that I'm not getting into right now. All that really matters is while they went back and forth telling us why they are not on the line, each of them for very different reasons, they also gave their opinions on the league itself. And then Noah Lyles said this part, which I cannot unhear, because he said that track and field right now is still an amateur sport. To clarify, when he says amateur, he doesn't mean that he is not a professional. There's no way that he could be an Olympic gold medalist, and for that matter, a world champion in the 100-meter dash, among other things, if he was not professional at his craft. But the sport itself is amateur, and not everybody agreed with him, even on the podcast, because Rai Benjamin had some things to say about it. Because he asked, what makes me not a professional? He gets paid to do track and field, and he does it at a very high level. It's why he's an Olympic gold medalist. Yes, we were all watching when that happened. But Noah Lyles doubled down to explain why it's still an amateur sport. Because technically speaking, almost anybody who wants can, at least in America, sign up to run races unattached, start recording times, and potentially run fast enough. And there's nothing to stop them from going out and competing at the World Championships or the Olympics if they're able to pull it off. And then he said this part, that Grand Slam track, the same league that he is not a part of, is the closest thing to professional track and field that we have ever seen, perhaps in my lifetime when I think about it. Because unlike everything else we're doing in professional track and field, we ain't just handing out lanes to whoever we really feel like it. Grand Slam track has a standard, and they're going to determine who gets a lane in that league and who doesn't. I admit that even when it comes to the Grand Slam conversation, they talked about a whole lot of things, and I don't have the ability to get into all of it right now. But I do think it's important that we now have the real conversation, because if track and field, even though we're clearly focused on the track part right now, is technically speaking an amateur sport, and Grand Slam track is the closest thing we've ever seen to professional track and field. And yes, we could talk about the Diamond League, but they also talked about it as well, so I'm going to address that part in a moment. Ultimately, why is the same man who said that he likes the idea of Grand Slam track and the professional direction it's going, still choosing not to put his name in the hat to compete in Grand Slam track? So yes, I apologize in advance because this video is a little bit different, because I actually care about the sport and I want to see it thrive. But I don't really know how to do that without being honest, because if you don't first admit that you have a problem, you cannot go out there and fix it and improve it for everybody else coming forward. And I personally want to say thank you to the 3 men who decided to have this conversation on camera, because their choice to do it exposed just about all of the reasons why the amateur sport that is track and field, and once again we're still focused on the track part right now, clearly has what it takes to move forward. But it also explains all of the reasons why we're struggling to get to that point. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. And I'm Coach Rob, the founder of SCARecruiting.com, where I rank the best track and field recruits across the entire nation. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I try to read them all. Before I go any further, I do have to recommend that you might want to watch the entire conversation if you really want complete context. That said, I am going to focus on what each man said individually in this conversation. Because remember, none of them are a part of Grand Slam track, at least not officially. But yet, they had a whole lot of opinions about it. Starting off with Vernon Norwood, who was the special guest talking to Noah Lyles and Rai Benjamin in the first place. He's the only one in the group who actually seems to want to be a part of Grand Slam, and expressed as much. He said on the podcast that he had hoped he would have gotten the call. That said, the 400 runners that they brought to Grand Slam were the 4 fastest that we had at the Olympic Games in 2024. So it kind of does make sense that those people would be the ones you would target to add on your racer slots. And he's willing to be a challenger, and I believe that is still in the works. All that being said, Vernon Norwood talked about the money situation as it relates to him as a professional athlete. Because Vernon Norwood said it himself, and you can go listen to the podcast for yourself, that Grand Slam is offering very real prize money. And when you say $100,000 to a professional track and field athlete, once again, we're still focused on the track part, very few athletes have the opportunity to actually make 6 figures, 100K or more, on the track. That's just the way it is, at least not in one calendar year. So when Grand Slam gives you the opportunity to go out there and run fast enough to pull it off, he was like, would make a whole lot of sense for his bank account to actually take the opportunity. I know the Diamond League is a thing, and yes, the Continental Tour as well, but the prize money they've been offering is really not all that much. On top of the fact that when you look at the way to do the fields, you kind of know who's going to win before most of them go off, because it's rare that they have multiple heavy hitters in that race. I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen, but there are times when it's like maybe 2 or 3 people who are really running for the lead, and everybody else on the starting line basically knows those top spots are long gone. Vernon Norwood is a pro. He runs for New Balance now, so I guess that's what makes you a pro in track and field. When you have a contract from an apparel brand that's like a legitimate brand that expects you to wear athletic gear. Regardless, he came up the rough side of the mountain because although he was an All-American back in college, from the time he became a pro, he had been pushing and grinding and racing as much as he possibly can. He's been at the World Indoor Championships. He's run a whole bunch of relays in the 4x4. He is now an Olympic gold medalist for his 4x4 talent. And he made the World Championship final in 2023 for the 400. But he didn't get a medal while he was there. That man, who's incredibly decorated at the college and I guess what we're calling the pro level, to get back to what Noah Lyles said, he still admits that making 6 figures from actually running track and field is very challenging to pull off. Let that sink in. So when Grand Slam track comes with a league and says, we're going to pay the athletes and we want people to run fast here, makes a whole lot of sense. But that brings up Rai Benjamin and his objections to the entire situation. Because he is not a part of Grand Slam track, and he definitely got a call. He actually says during the podcast that he didn't feel that they offered him enough money, which is another conversation that I'm not really getting into right now. Because ultimately, he makes a whole lot of statements that question whether or not we even needed a Grand Slam track to begin with. So before I go there, allow me to say this, and you can let me know in the comments if I'm talking reckless about it. Is there anybody out there who really believes that the current state of professional track and field, and I admit that I am thinking from an American context, is in a healthy place when we think about pro sports? Keep in mind, the minimum salary in the NFL, in the NBA, is close to $1 million. That's the minimum for like a new basketball player or a new football player who's on a full contract on a roster in those leagues. You compare that to the money on the table in track and field, where Vernon Norwood, who is a decorated athlete, just without having an individual medal outdoors at the Olympics or the Worlds, that man is excited at the opportunity to make maybe six figures by going out there and running. We're not talking about your endorsements or everything else. We're just talking about the running. Because Rai Benjamin says we already have the Diamond League. So maybe we don't really need Grand Slam to come and counteract it because we already have something. He said maybe we should invest money into the Diamond League and maybe we didn't really need Grand Slam, like the competition and so on and so forth. Noah Lyles addresses it and addresses that point, so I'm not going to really go there. But what I do need to say is this part. After everything Rai Benjamin said, it is safe to say that he is a skeptic at best when it comes to Grand Slam track. He doesn't like the schedule of the meets. He doesn't like the idea of having to run multiple races in a weekend, specifically having to do it at a time on the calendar that's pretty distant from the World Championships. But the most important thing that he said is that if you win Grand Slam, nobody's really going to remember. What people are really going to remember is if you get a medal at the Worlds. But then he corrected himself and said, well, actually, they probably won't remember that. It's really going to be if you win a medal at the Olympics. And that is the real conversation. Because before we get to what Noah Lyles said, I think Rai Benjamin already hit the nail on the head. Professional track and field is not the same thing as the Olympics. There's a whole bunch of sports at the Olympics. Track and field is just one of them. But fundamentally, professional sports is when you get paid to go out there and compete in the actual sport. That is what Grand Slam track is actually proposing. The thing is, I understand that Rai Benjamin is an athlete who has climbed to the top of the mountain in the broken structure that is pro track and field, whatever we want to call it, right now. He is an Olympic gold medalist. He's been at the World Championships and the Olympics multiple times and gotten medals, normally gold or silver every time he's going there. He dominates America when it comes to our trials or USAs. And he does have a professional contract, quote unquote professional, representing Nike. That puts him in a very select category of what he has been able to accomplish. But actual pro sports is when you can go out there and compete in the sport and get paid for it. The Olympics themselves don't technically pay you. You might get a benefit or like a bonus, maybe from USATF or the US Olympic Committee or something like that. But that is not really what's going to pay you. Like those bonuses aren't enough to eat off of, even for one calendar year. At least if you got real bills and you ain't living in your mom's basement. That said, pro track and field is not really what we've been doing in most of these competitions. Yes, there's a stage for athletes to compete, and some people can make money while they do it. And you might even get brand deals. And yes, you can even model for Nike or model for Adidas if that's what you want to do, and you're able to convince them to give you money. But the sport really doesn't come professionalized till there are guardrails, and certain people can get on the court, or in this case, in the lanes, and other people can't. The ones who are on those lanes are pros. Don't matter how much talent you got. If you're not on this track, you ain't a pro yet. Because that's what they do in the NBA. There's a whole bunch of guys who were talented enough to play in the league before they got there. They didn't become professional NBA players until the moment they got on a roster. And I chose to wait until now to go over Noah Lyles' comments, because he was the last one to share his thoughts in the context of that conversation. Because just like Rai Benjamin, he was offered a contract to be a part of Grand Slam. And he also didn't believe that the money made a whole lot of sense for him. But unlike Rai Benjamin, his concerns weren't exactly the calendar of the meets and trying to make everything fit for the Worlds. At least that's not what he talked about. He actually likes the idea of Grand Slam and what it's trying to accomplish. His biggest concern was whether or not it was going to be basically the Grand Slam hit that they're attempting to be in terms of promotion and media deals, which they actually have a media deal right now. It's with CW Sports, NBC, and Peacock. They're basically taking the spot that the Diamond League vacated when they went to Flow Track. Well, good luck with that when it comes to Flow Track, because I don't think you're ever getting back if Grand Slam works. But at the end of all that, Noah Lyles wants to see it work. But it sounds like he really wants to see the infrastructure fully built out before he would attach his name. I'm gonna choose to believe Noah when he says that he really wants to be a part of Grand Slam, but he's hesitant to put his name on it, or at least attach his name, until he sees the infrastructure fully laid out. He has a few ideas on how they could improve it, but that's not what I'm gonna focus on. I think what matters most is that Noah Lyles wants to see the infrastructure built out before he attaches his name. I am sorry to say that when it comes to the current state of, I guess it's not professional track and field, if we're going off of his words, I'll call it elite track and field from this point on in the video. The current state of that thing is in a place where right now we need all hands on deck. Because Vernon Norwood calls it out when he goes on the show. He's like, Grand Slam does have some of the top athletes. You've got Sydney, you've got Gabby, like you have talent. But you don't have Rai, you don't have Grant Holloway, you don't have Noah Lyles, at least not yet. That is an issue. Because when they're concerned about television media rights, I'm going to tell you exactly how those conversations went. Because if you were to set up a meeting with ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, the title that they gave themselves, and when they ask, well, what type of track and field product are you bringing? Considering the athletes themselves have already bought in to, it's about narratives, it's about telling stories. It's pretty hard to tell a story about someone when nobody knows who you're talking about. The NBA can sell stories because they have stars. And when the ratings go down, it's normally because the star players aren't on the court. People care way more about watching Steph Curry than they do just about the Warriors. They don't have that much attachment to the uniform. They care a whole lot more about the player. It's the reason why LeBron James fans went with him to Miami, went back with him to Cleveland, and now they're in LA. Even if they don't live there, their heart is there when they're watching him. If the current athletes right now, and see, I don't blame the athletes. This is not their job to understand the infrastructure of how to put together a league. But building leagues, if we take a page out of the WNBA for a moment, because they've been building in a direction for a while, they got all their players on one page where they realized if we want this league to be anything, especially something bigger than what it is right now, we all have to prioritize the health and the growth of the sport. Don't do anything that takes away from the WNBA brand. And from what I can tell, they have held to that approach. And the most recent year the WNBA had was by far the most successful they've had in over a decade. So yes, if everybody buys in, we can actually go somewhere. But in their case, they already had a league. Grand Slam track is a brand new league. But I'm bought in on it because I don't really have a choice in the matter. It's the only thing that we actually have. And Noah Lyles hit the nail on the head when he said this part, that the Diamond League is kind of misleading because it's really not a league at all. It's a bunch of independent meets that have their own meet directors. They're all doing their own thing for the most part. But somebody came in and said, we could make money off of it if we put it all under one umbrella. It's the reason why you can't approach the Diamond League with the same mindset of how you would renovate it and fix it. And that was part of the conversation that he and Rai Benjamin kind of had on camera. Because I guess maybe Rai Benjamin wasn't taking this fully into account when he thought about, well, hey, let's just put money into the Diamond League. It doesn't really work like that. As a matter of fact, the Diamond League, for the most part, is paying high-level athletes to make appearances, perhaps a Rai Benjamin or even a Noah, in order to more or less showcase their talent against whoever else they feel like throwing in the lanes. People they can get to agree to take those lanes without really being compensated that much. Which get back to the whole fastest amateurs part, the issue of what we're actually dealing with. Track and field is an amateur sport, but it does have professional athletes actually in it. Rai Benjamin himself should actually know this part, because he was just at the US Olympic trials. And I'm going to remind you, the men who were in the other lanes while he was competing. When I took a look at the field in the men's 400 hurdles, there were about 33 athletes who were listed on the starting line. Of those 33, 23 of them were American college athletes who had just competed in a college uniform prior to the Olympic trials. Like they just walked off the track from college. Of the men who were remaining, they weren't all quote unquote pros by the definition you and me might be thinking. Most of them, 6 of them in fact, were either unattached entirely or affiliated with some type of a track club. All that really means is they don't really get paid for track and field yet, like at all, at least not from a contract, but they might have somebody who helps them with their fees to pay to attend meets, maybe airfare, everything else. There were only 3 men on the starting line who actually had a deal with a legitimate apparel brand that is expected to pay them money. We don't even know the details of any of those deals. We just know that they have one. Rai Benjamin and another athlete represented Nike, and one more represented ASICS. That's it. As you would expect, the people who had pro contracts were supposed to go to the games, but guess what? One of the 3 didn't actually make it. It was an unattached athlete who got the spot. And we very easily could have had a college athlete make it as well, because Caleb Dean fell when he was headed to the home straight in the 400 hurdles. So hey, it is what it is. What I am trying to say is if you don't believe that we are in an amateur sports situation, then why are we actually running against people who the NCAA calls amateurs, or those who don't actually have contracts at all? When they actually asked Noah Lyles, doesn't your Adidas contract make you a pro athlete? He was like, well, actually, it just makes me a general contractor for Adidas. He's like, legally speaking, if you read the contract, that's essentially what it says. Professional sports is normally something that runs through a league. A league that has very clear guidelines, employs you, and pays you for your participation. To be real about it, Grand Slam track right now is looking a whole lot more like UFC and the model that they have in place than anything else. Because no, it is not a team sport, but they are setting up a structure with very legitimate competitions, with attention brought to them. They do have media deals and everything else. The athletes will be compensated, and they determine who gets on the lanes and who does not. Because the UFC makes very clear distinction about who's a part of their thing and who's fighting and anything else you got. Because most people don't really know what other leagues out there doing. People think UFC is the name of the sport. No, that's the name of the league. The sport is called MMA. We've got Bellator and a whole bunch of other stuff going on that nobody pays attention to, at least not to my knowledge. Noah Lyles is correct. The track and field is more or less in an amateur sport situation than anything else. And I totally understand why he wants to see more infrastructure built out to a league like Grand Slam before he attaches his name. He even said that he hopes that he is wrong because he likes the direction that they're going and would love to be a part of it and thinks it could be a great benefit. I'm going to say it right now because I don't really see another choice in the matter. I've got to go all in on Grand Slam because I don't see anywhere else for me to go all in with. We've already addressed that the Diamond League is not really a viable product, at least when you think about expanding the scope of the sport in the world of professional track and field. If you like the Diamond League for what it is, that's fine. But if you want to see more from it, there's just not an infrastructure in place that really allow you to get much more. But I also understand what is underneath his hesitation, as well as Rai Benjamin's for that matter. Because Rai Benjamin said it out loud, that it doesn't make sense for him and where he is in his career to put his name in for Grand Slam track at this present moment. The only difference is Rai Benjamin and Noah Lyles are all the way at the top of the food chain, and they don't really share much relationship with almost anybody else in the sport. Because Vernon Norwood is like the cut below them. Still an Olympic gold medalist from a relay. World Championship finalist without a medal. And for him, he really didn't see much of a choice. Grand Slam track was going to be the best financial decision that he could make during this season, even though they technically didn't give him a call to become a racer in the league to begin with. The athletes can wait around for the World Championships if they want to, and I get it that the track and field community has been trained to care about that moment. But all of those people who are watching at the Olympics, like the casual fans who are in the margins, they could care less about what's about to happen at these Worlds in September. Because they're just waiting for the next Olympic Games. Because as far as they know, track and field athletes really don't compete at all unless it's at the Games. And in every other Olympic sport that people actually want to watch, the World Championships, which exist in those sports, like basketball, are basically just a bootleg version of the Olympics anyway. It's the reason why Team USA basketball really doesn't win the World Championships in that sport anymore. They just kind of send whoever. And if they win, fine, but they probably won't. But just make sure when it comes to the games that at least we actually give a good go of it to try to come away with gold. It tells you just how important the concept of a world championship actually is. Again, to a casual sports fan, people don't really care that much. They only focus on the games. And considering the games only come around once every 4 years, that still gives you at least 3 years in a row to focus on doing something else that is actually pro track and field. Considering most elite track athletes, like Noah Lyles, are very aware of the problems with the sport. And they want to see it change. And Noah Lyles himself says that Grand Slam track could be the solution. I'm gonna have to say this part. As far as I can tell, the track community right now desperately needs Grand Slam track to work. I'm talking about most of the athletes, and I'm definitely talking about the fans. The only thing that I'm concerned about at this present moment is that an athlete like Noah Lyles, who admittedly wants to see the sport grow, may not necessarily recognize that when it comes to Grand Slam track and how the history of this league is going to be written, if you are either going to be a part of the solution or you are going to be a part of the problem. Choose wisely. In the sport of track and field, confidence is everything, because when you win, that is just the moment when everybody else finds out what you already knew to be true, that fast is a lifestyle. Get your fast is a lifestyle track and field gear at scarecruiting.com/shop or use the link in the description below. It's a huge support to me and this channel, so I can continue to make you more content like this. And remember, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.